Here's what we're making today. Pinwheel dishcloths. Depending on your exact gauge, they may be closer to 6 inches or 7.5 inches, and either way it will be all right. While they are basically circular, you can see that the way we're doing it results in some sort of points around the edges, which are actually quite attractive. And they do not roll because of a special feature. Oops, still need to snip a tail here. This tuck rib column all the way around, and that renders them non-roll. These two are the same yarn, and the one on the right is bigger than the one on the left because I used the loom set at a larger gauge. And I left the yarn tail here so that you can see the way the work proceeds. This is the beginning and ending of it, where I finished working the Kitchener seam. And it actually is knitted around like this. Let's look at it on the brown plain colored one, because you can clearly see the columns of stitches going in this direction. You can use any loom that can be adjusted for worsted weight. That is also known as number 4 yarn in the US and Canada. I've got 2 that we're going to use. This is a Kiss small gauge. This time I'm using 2 washers. The time that produced this, I used 3 washers. This one's still slightly damp from its first washing. It's not quite finished. It's pulling in, but you can still see that the difference produced was noticeable, even though this one may dry in another 1/4 of an inch. The still damp one, that is. I think I like this one better, but it depends what you're doing. You do want to knit on any loom a little bit loosely for the reason that most of the cotton yarns that we're going to use both loft and shrink a little bit once they are washed. And these will be washed. They're dishcloths or body cloths. So they're going to loft and shrink, and it's not desirable to have them do so and result in a stiff fabric that would scrape your skin off. So this, I think, is nice in its texture, and perhaps you can see this one, while looser, is still a decent washing texture. I have set both looms up with a few rows of waste yarn. It looks like I dropped a stitch in my waste yarn down there, but it's unimportant. It's just a placeholder, and it's serving as a provisional cast on as well. Then in each case, I knitted 1 row of contrasting yarn. I used the same waste yarn and contrasting yarns on both looms. Really, the work proceeds just exactly the same, whatever loom you use. We'll start at the right without a knot. Just start wrapping. This is the Kiss method of making U-stitch, and it's the only sensible stitch to use when knitting stockinette on a Kiss, in my opinion. But this is what the Kiss was designed to do. So we'll knit over, and we'll be knitting over that 1 row of contrasting yarn, which will eventually allow us to remove the waste yarn without any kind of fuss. Once we get to the 3rd stitch from the right, 1, 2, 3, we do something different there, which is nothing. This is the right to left row, and all the right to left rows we will do nothing, just leave the wrap on there. Let's do the same thing on the other loom. I'm making U-stitches here also, but my way of doing it is not the classic way. I just lift my previous stitch up, over, and tug, which up and over is tight. It's called the flat stitch. See that? But once I tug the old stitch, it pulls my new yarn, which is blue in this case, around the peg and creates a U-stitch with no fuss at all. Now, classically, people do this 1 stitch at a time by wrapping like that, lifting up and over. I do want the looseness of the U-stitch as opposed to the flat stitch. If you like making the traditional knit stitch, that's fine. I don't like making it. I think it's a waste of time when you can do this. So we knit right to left, and I just realized I forgot an important part of the pattern, but it's not too late to fix it. I should have left a wrap, but not knitted this stitch. And there it is, back to where it should be. The row 1 is complete. Row 2 is knitted from left to right in every case on every kind of loom. And it's starting with the second stitch from the left. We're going to, basically, we are slipping this stitch. Slip means don't wrap, don't knit. So we will wrap all the way across for the normal knit stitch, which for kiss again is the U-stitch. And when we get to peg 3, we will purl through both loops. This is the only purl stitch in the design, is always on peg 3. The remainder I'll knit over. On this kind of loom, it's exactly the same except for the different looks of the loom. We'll knit all the way across to peg number 3, purl peg number 3, and then knit the last 2 stitches. And by the way, I do have a PDF file with these instructions, so if you like seeing them written, you can download that. It's on Ravelry, and it's not free, but it's very inexpensive. Let's knit these, making sure to get that looser U-stitch. Now we are up to stitch number 3 from the right. We purl it. And knit the last 2. When going back to the left for the next row, and for all subsequent rows, we slip the first stitch. Don't wrap it, don't knit it. Knit the second stitch, wrap the next stitch, but don't knit it, and knit the remainder. But this time, we won't knit quite as many. We will shorten the row by 1 more stitch. This is called short rowing, and it's similar to something that we do in socks, but normally in socks we want to try to avoid the holes that short rowing can make. Here, actually, the holes are a design feature, and they help with the scrubbing. So the last row, this was the last or the end stitch knitted. So an easy way to remember this, if you're keeping it in your head rather than looking at the pattern, is on the 3rd row you end at the left on the 3rd stitch from the edge. On the 4th row, the end stitch on the left is the 4th stitch from the edge, and so on all the way to the end. So to short row here, we've knitted this coming right to left. We will not knit it going left to right. We will go back to the right, beginning on stitch 4. Knit over here, purl on the 3rd, using both of these loops, and knit the last 2. Let's get started on the step we just did using the kiss loom. And I'm sure you're beginning to see you may prefer one loom over the other, but the design is the same design. Wrap. This is the 3rd row, so our final stitch at the left will be the 3rd stitch. I'll knit them all over. This is the 4th row. We're starting at the left, so the 1st stitch on the left will be the 4th one. Our rows are getting shorter. We'll work in knit stitches over to the 3rd stitch from the right, purl through both of those loops, and knit the last 2. And I will finish knitting off this one and be right back. At this point, I'm sure that you've caught on to how much the pattern works the same on every loom. So I'm just going to show you on this one, because it's the one I'm more comfortable with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5th row, end stitch is the 5th stitch. And we will knit off every stitch except the 3rd, because it needs to hold. What's going on with that stitch holding a loop and then purling is the creation of that row of tuck rib. So you can see getting this knot to roll is just simplicity itself. We're doing the 6th row. This is the 6th stitch from the left, 6th peg holding the 6th stitch. So back we go to the right. Purl, and I'll knit the last 2. We're ready to begin the 7th row by slipping stitch number 1 as usual when moving right to left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this should be the last stitch of the row. All of them except the 3rd from the right should be knitted over. It will hold a loop for us. Row 8 is beginning. This is the 8th needle from the left. So we knit all the way to the right, with the exception of the one purl on peg 3 from the right. And I'll get these knitted over. Row 9 coming up. And if you lose track of where you are, just simply count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've already wrapped the 9th peg from the left, so that's all we need to do. Knit over everything except number 3 from the right. Slip the last stitch that we knitted when going from left to right. Purl number 3 from the right through the 2 loops. My purl's trying to grow on me, but I will fix it. There we go. And I'll knit these over. Let's do row 11. That last one was row 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So there's our last peg wrapped. This one just holds the loop. So we don't have very much to knit on this row. On the way back, we purl and then knit the final 2 stitches. Now rows 13 and 14, we just did 11 and 12, are slightly different. First of all, we don't slip. It's actually optional. You can slip this stitch because it keeps the edge so nice and neat. But if you can make a very neat edge stitch and tighten it up, the point will be a little bit more prominent if you do knit it. So it's really your choice. And we knit only the 2 edge stitches, and then we go back and knit the other way. I cannot reach around the camera and do it, but if you know how to make a half stitch or a half hitch by lifting and twisting, that's okay to do it here. It may make it neater and easier. I think I split that yarn. Let's fix that. It basically is like this. Well, lo and behold, I can do it around the camera. But that's an easy way to get a neat stitch when you're going back and forth just a little bit when you want to turn around and you go the other way. Because wrapping like this, it's a little harder to get it held properly and the right size. On the Kiss, it's easier than on other looms, but the half hitch is an option, like that. At this point, you can see what I've knitted. It's a wedge. We knit 9 of these in total, all exactly like the one I just knitted. So let's all knit our remaining 8 wedges quietly to ourselves and get back together when we're done. All right, I've already gotten this one off of the loom. It was on these 14 pegs. I knitted all of my wedges, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 around. We ended up, of course, with the working yarn on the right side. And I knitted 1 plain row all the way to the left, which is what you should do too. Then 1 plain row of a thin contrasting yarn, which we will use as ravel cord, and a few rows to finish up of any contrasting yarn that is convenient that you have odds and ends of. Now let's look at this one still on the loom. Oh yes, when you cut your yarn tail, leave about 24 inches of it, and it will be in the center of the circle. Now here we are still on the loom. I have already knitted my 1 plain row, and if you didn't remember, if you had knitted it yet, you'd be able to tell because there are no wraps remaining. Remember, we've been short rowing, so as the row got shorter, it wasn't really wraps, but you could see things like I'm showing you there. Let's point to it. The things that happen as we shorten, little twists of yarn. But we know that I must have knitted them all off because this is one continuous row of plain stitches, and you can see the yarn continuing from peg to peg. So it is ready now for me to knit a row of ravel cord, doesn't matter which direction because it's just a placeholder for now, and then a few rows of waste yarn. And now we will learn what the waste yarn is really for. To get this one ready to close, we knit our final row. Actually, of course, we'll be holding it like this. Then a row of ravel cord using any strong, smooth yarn, just a short length of it, and then several rows of waste yarn. After that, you just lift it right off of the loom. I usually run the yarn tail through the open loops. It's just waste yarn, but you don't want it unraveling while you're working on it. You can bind off if you want, but you need not take the time. Thread the yarn tail into a yarn needle. Mine happens to be a double-eye needle because it's what was handy, but pay no attention to that. It's not important whether it is or not. We just need one eye for this. And see the yarn tail coming out from the very last row of main yarn. This lime green is not main yarn. That's my ravel cord. So I'm going to come up through the end stitch, and I have, by the way, turned my waste yarn to the purl side and safety pinned it down. You don't really have to safety pin, but for demonstration purposes I thought it might keep it out of our way. And come up through the end stitch on the other side. This would have been, I'm coming up now through what was the cast on end. The yarn tail, of course, finished at the final end. That starts it, and now we're just going to Kitchener stitch. Let me straighten out my focus here, sorry. The camera is misbehaving. I sure wish my arms were longer at moments like these. Okay, down through the same stitch we came up through a minute ago, up through the neighboring stitch. Now across the work to the other side. The lime green, remember, is not what I'm working into. It's a pink row here. Down through the same stitch that we came up through before, and you can see my purple where I came up, down, up through the neighboring stitch. If we get this right, the seam will be as close to invisible as a seam can be. And you do not really have to Kitchener this. If you would prefer to use another method of closure, you may. You can seam it, just cast it on normally and seam it. The seam will show, but this is a dishcloth, not a wedding dress. I don't think the sky will fall. If you have other ways that you prefer to arrange to Kitchener than this one, many people like to put their work on 2 straight knitting needles. Fine, it'll work great. I offer this one because, in my opinion, there we go, it's a little bit easier for new knitters to get this one right than any other method. You don't have to figure out which direction the stitches are aligned. You can clearly see them. So in order not to get a terminal crick in my neck, I'm going to finish Kitchenering off camera and then show you the rest. Here we are. The secret to an invisible Kitchener stitch is getting your stitches that you're making by going up and down the same size and tension as the stitches in the work. So we can check before I remove the waste yarn, and I did pretty well. It's always going to look a little funny with the waste yarn still attached because that's making it puff up, but I think I'm satisfied. So here is the whole thing about ravel cord. I'm going to pull hard. There was only one length of this on each side, and if all goes well, which it's not, because I have caught it in my safety pin. Let me free it. If all goes well, it'll just pull out. I believe things are free and ready to pull. And look at that. One side of the waist is gone. Things are smoothing right out. Let's prepare to get the other one. If you have caught it in any stitches anywhere, you need to free it. And I have caught it over here, so let me free that and I'll be right back. Ready for action. Let's give this a tug. It's out. That's free. And here's what the back looks like. Here's the right side. I can remove this last safety pin now. And there's our cloth. These two were knitted with the same yarn and setup. This one's been washed, and this one hasn't. And so you see what I mean about shrinking and lofting. Quite a difference occurs. The blue one's going to be pretty too, and I know that yours will as well. In fact, I look forward to seeing them if you want to send me a picture.